The most fundamental thing wrong with being a nice guy is you're not honest. You're not authentic. There's not a you, and you don't let the world see who you are. You don't let you see who you are. And so, in No More Mr. Nice Guy, that, like the first chapter to the book, I list all the things that tend to be a problem for nice guys: our dishonesty, our giving to get, our strings attached, our not being dependable, our passive aggressiveness, our resentment. All of these things tend to make, quote, nice guys not so nice.
You have found the Thinking Mind podcast.
Dr. Robert Glover. Dr. Glover, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for the invitation, Alex.
I read your book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was a very useful, interesting take on the way men can approach, their lives in general and relationships. But what I noticed when researching you is you've had quite an interesting life story yourself, and unlike a lot of public psychotherapists, your public life and your professional orientation, they kind of mirror each other quite a lot, I noticed. So maybe you could take us a bit through your journey. How did you end up in psychotherapy? What was the personal transformation that came with it for you?
I'm smiling as you ask that because, I probably am a lot more public than a lot of therapists tend to be in terms of just myself, sharing my own life experience. And one of the things that I often tell people in, my classes or seminars or the work that I do is that pretty much everything I teach and everything I've ever written has come out of my own life experiences. It's come out of what I struggled with personally, whatever I bumped into and usually didn't understand or wasn't doing well. I thought, well, what's this about? And that's pretty much always been true. In terms of how I got attracted into just psychology and psychotherapy in general, I grew up Christian, grew up in a fundamental Christian church. And kind of when I reached that age where everybody says, well, what are you going to do with your life? I don't know. And I thought, well, I like working with people. I like talking with people. Maybe I'll be a minister. So I went to a college to start to study to be a minister. And my first semester of college, I had a psychology 101. And I loved it. It just blew me away. Just everything about it was just so cool, so interesting. And so one was just an intellectual, curiosity and stimulation that drew me into it. Now, most professionals that get into mental health, I'll make a generalization, but a lot of them, we get into it kind of working through our own stuff, whether we know that at the time or not. And I was, and I was drawn to marriage and family therapy as a study. And I realized, because it was about fixing my family. That was always my role as a child in my family, was to kind of navigate my dad's moods, be there for my mother and be the good man and, listen to her complain about my father. And so, that was a role I played real early on, was listening to people complain about their relationships. Now, you don't usually put all that together when you first start, the journey. You're drawn to it for whatever reason. And so I just continued getting my education, because the further I went in school, the more I enjoyed it, which is interesting, because I seriously thought about dropping out of high school because I wasn't enjoying it. And but the further along I got, just the more the more kind of you got to do your own research, and you got to do your own thing, and you got to explore what interests you, and you got to have intelligent discussions about things, not just study facts and regurgitate them. So I kept going, got a PhD in marriage and family therapy, worked as a minister for about 8 years, and left that career about 8 years into it. So I was in my early 30s, and went out and started trying to find work as a therapist, and couldn't seem to find it. So I thought, well, I'm not making any money not doing anything, so I think I'll start my own private practice and not make any money doing that. And slowly over time, it began to actually, make money. And about 2 years into my second marriage, my now second ex-wife said to me, everybody thinks you're so nice, but you're really not. You treat me badly. You're passive aggressive. Now, I already had a PhD, and I didn't even know what passive aggressiveness was. You hurt me, you embarrass me. You have your victim pukes where you let things build up until it just you puke it out all on me, and said you need to go get help. You need to go get therapy. Well, again, I was a therapist. I'd never gotten therapy before, so I thought, well, you're the one, referring to my ex-wife, you're the one that's always unhappy and moody and never wants to have sex anymore and is always angry and nothing's ever good enough. But I guess I'll go get help, even though you seem like the one that most needs it. And I thought, I was a nice guy. I thought being a nice guy would make people like me, love me, appreciate me. And in the case of my wife, want to have sex with me. And so luckily, I went seeking answers to why me being a nice guy didn't make my wife appreciate me more and keep her in a better mood and make her want to have sex with me. And luckily, I landed in some really good spaces. I first went to a 12-step group for sex addicts and found out real quickly I wasn't a sex addict. I wasn't having enough sex to be a sex addict. But it was a great place for me to just start opening up and revealing. Like I said, I grew up in a fundamental Christian church, grew up with a critical father, grew up trying to please my mother, grew up during the 60s and 70s of angry feminism. Don't be like those bad men that, the women are all angry about. So I kept everything in. I mean, I always try to give the good front, everything looks good, try to be nice, avoid conflict, treat everybody well so everybody will like me. And so in this 12-step group, for the first time in my life, I just started revealing me. I just started telling stuff about me that, I never told anybody before and never want anybody to know. And I was probably early 30s, somewhere between 32, 33, 34 years old. And it was just for me, it was transformational to just go. I mean, this group met like at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning once a week. And I looked forward to going to it because I was enjoying so much revealing me. And, nobody was shocked. Nobody died. Nobody attacked me. All they ever say in 12-step meetings is, thank you for sharing, Robert. And I thought, wow, this is really kind of cool. And then I started working with a therapist. And I remember in our very first therapy session, she, I don't know if she did this with all of her clients in the first session or if she could see I really needed it. She dove into talking about boundaries, and she put a little string on the ground and said, you stand over there. I'm going to stand over here. I'm going to come in your space, push you back. I want you to stop me when you begin to feel uncomfortable. Well, she pushed me all the way back to the wall. And, I kept saying stop, but she didn't. And so we talked about boundaries. And again, here I was in my second marriage in my early 30s, already had a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I had never heard of boundaries. I mean, it was a concept completely foreign to me. And so from there, I began to just be exposed to things that helped me begin to develop a healthier inner roadmap, life paradigm. I did learn to start revealing myself to safe people. I did open myself to hearing feedback about me. I got into a safe place where I could release toxic shame and develop a more accurate view of myself. Started learning to set boundaries. Not long after that, I joined a men's therapy group that I was in for maybe 4 or 5 years, and did a bulk of my, what I'll call my nice guy recovery at that time, of just learning to connect with men, learning to ask for what I want, learning to be transparent, learning to have boundaries, learning to set the tone for my life, breaking out of that seeking approval and external validation. So in that process, as a therapist, I noticed a number of my male clients who were coming to me, often in relationship or on their own, but usually with relationship issues. They were saying the same things I was. I'm a nice guy. I'm one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I treat her better than her ex. I'm raising her kids. I do everything for her. I try to make her happy. It's never good enough. When's it going to be my turn? She's always mad. She never wants to have sex anymore. And I thought I can finish her sentences for them. So I started an every other week, No More Mr. Nice Guy men's group. And I just started writing just little chapters to just give to them about what I was beginning to understand myself, why and how I became a nice guy, Why there did seem to be so many men around me with this same paradigm that if I'm just nice and treat everybody well, everybody will like me, I'll get my needs met, nobody'll ever get upset at me, I'll have a smooth life. And so I just kept writing, and these guys and often their partners would say, Robert, you need to write a book. You need to go on Oprah. This could be a bestseller. And, the more that pressure went up, the more I go, I don't know that I could do all that. But I kept writing, and over about 7 years, finished it, and took about 3 years to get it published. And a lot of editing companies, publishing companies, their editors said, Robert, I really like your book. It's well written, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self-help book. And they were wrong. The book's been out about 20 years now, and it makes yearly 6-figure royalty checks. So apparently men do buy self-help books and do want, especially now with Amazon, where guys can just go online and, click the book. And people who bought this book also bought this book. I do that all the time. I'm buying 3 or 4 books at a time. So since then, over the last 20 years or so, my work pretty much has evolved where I mainly work with men. I love working with men. I love that I can be clear and direct. I love that men are looking for answers of how to be more fulfilled, how to have better relationships, how to have love, how to live with passion and purpose. So that's kind of an introduction to my story as to how I came to write No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah, and there's something refreshing about your transparentness. Obviously there are lots of reasons why a psychotherapist may choose not to disclose so much about their personal life. There are good reasons for it, but to have examples such as yourself is very useful because you can see, you show the working, you can see how you came to the conclusions that you came to. Personally, when I'm thinking about psychotherapeutic constructs or ideas or what theories might be useful, I like to triangulate, between 3 points, which is the theory from talented clinicians, what I've observed in other people, my clients, and just people I know from my personal life and my own experience. And if I find an idea, say, where I can see there's a pattern between those 3 points, that for me is a really reliable indicator that it's a good idea. It's an idea that has some usefulness, even if it's not, conveying an ultimate truth, but at least pragmatically, it's a useful construct.
And I think useful is a really good word. It's a key word because, I think if we don't make this practical in real life, if we can't share I've struggled with this. I tell people, like I said, I had a PhD in marriage and family therapy at 29 years old, and I'm on my 3rd marriage, and I bumbled my way through every relationship I've had. And that's where I've learned is through those bumblings, through the not knowing how to do stuff, of how doing things unconsciously or projecting or just doing things in a rote way. It's through my struggles that I've learned more than I ever learned in my PhD program. Now, the PhD program gave me a good foundation theoretically and gave me some good skill sets for doing therapy. But in terms of just understanding life and relationship, not so much. And again, the people I work with, especially men, tell me all the time, Robert, I appreciate how authentic you are, how transparent you are. And I tell people, nobody would have accused me of those things 30 years ago. I was so guarded, so walled off, and I doubt that I was a very good therapist because, I'm so disconnected from myself. So, people really want stuff that is practical and that works. Theory's great, but theory doesn't usually change lives. And if you can apply theory, like you're talking with your triangulation, if you can apply theory to real life, that's when lives change. And I think that's what we're about, is helping people not fix themselves, but grow in ways that give them, the more fulfilled life, the fuller life they're looking for.
So let's diving a bit deeper into the nice guy archetype. What's the problem with being a nice guy? You often hear women anecdotally saying things like, I just don't meet guys that are actually kind or nice, and I wish I could meet someone that's nicer. But here you are saying that there is this nice guy archetype. What does it look like, and what's the problem with this?
All right. I like using the word archetype for it. You know what's funny? When over the years, as I've talked to people, strangers about not, what I do. People, you're on an airplane, you've got hours, and people, all right, what do you do? Well, I do this. I wrote a book. Well, what's your book? And it's funny, especially when I talk to women, I tend to get two responses when I talk about the nice guy archetype, nice guy syndrome. One is women go, "Oh, there's guys like that out there," and I said, you've dated a few assholes in your life, right? And I go, how'd you know? And then the other response that women have is, oh yeah, my brother's like that. Oh, my ex was like that. My father, oh yeah, always just trying to make the woman happy. They have no real identity. There's no sense of self. And so some women really get it because they've either seen their father or a brother or a past relationship. And in fact, you'd be surprised how many men, come to take a course with me or come work with me and say like either their wife or girlfriend or their ex gave them my book. So to move back to your question, my theory about nice guy syndrome, I think, a lot of what I call nice guys, and it's the passively pleasing, trying to make people happy, seeking external validation, avoiding conflict, putting other people's needs first. I think part of this can be just innate temperament. I think I was born, pretty easygoing, pretty resilient, and it's funny. My mother, who's 87, and over the last several years, if I get in a new relationship and my mother was around that woman at all, my mother would always say something like, Bobby never did like conflict, which I think was her way of saying, be nice to my son, to the women I was with. And whenever my mother would say that, I thought, who the fuck likes conflict? I mean, why would anybody like conflict? Some people love conflict. But you know what? I seem to be attracted and married people that like conflict. My wife, Mexican woman, loves to fight, loves a good fight. And me, no, I kind of like vindicating myself when I've been accused of something I haven't done. But some people are really comfortable with conflict. But my temperament is, it makes me anxious. I don't enjoy it. It's not.
This is the agreeableness, disagreeableness trait in the big five.
Sure, this is just part of my temperament, and that's okay. It's who I am. Now, of course, I do have to learn skills to deal with conflictual situations and deal with them head on rather than avoid them. But I don't think I'll ever like them. Right? I don't think they'll ever not cause me some degree of anxiety. That's just me. Okay, so part of nice guy syndrome, I think, can just be natural temperament, just a pleasing. Some babies are born just wanting to please. Others are born, wanting to raise hell. It's just how we pop out. So, but what I began to see for really, this probably applies to all people, not just nice guys, but at a very early age, weeks, months old. Every child is born vulnerable, needy, immature. Of course, our prefrontal cortexes don't start developing till a few years old. The only part of our brain really online is the brain stem, the amygdala, the fight, flight, freeze, the survival parts of our brain. And as you're probably aware, the theory is that at that age we internalize emotional memory. We store up emotional experiences in those primitive parts of our brain, not in the thinking rational parts that haven't developed yet. So every child, anytime it feels uncomfortable in any way, because it's been left alone, or it's cold, or it's hungry, or its diaper's dirty, it experiences emotional pain or some sort of trauma, and that gets internalized in the emotional part of our brain. Now, this feels bad, so every baby, in a very immature way, begins to develop defense and survival mechanisms. We develop mechanisms to try to soothe and comfort those feelings we have that feel bad. We might suck our thumb. We might sleep more. We might cry more. We might smile more. We might become needless and wantless. Now, this isn't thought out. These are just, very immature responses to try not to feel bad. The second defense survival mechanism that babies tend to develop is, again, without being able to think in words about this, is how do I prevent these kinds of painful experiences happen to me again in the future? This becomes our emotional operating system. How do I soothe and comfort myself now? And how do I prevent these things from happening in the future? Every human being does this in one way or another. Nice guy syndrome is just one category of how some people internalize to do that. Yeah. So the theory that I work with is that what happens is those painful experiences get internalized as what's called toxic shame. I'm bad. I caused this. All children are narcissistic by nature. They're the center of their universe. They believe they cause everything, good or bad. So it's very grandiose. Babies are grandiose. I either cause these things that hurt, or I have the power to fix them and make them better. And again, all children internalize in the same way. So what happens for the nice guys internalizes this toxic shame. Not only am I bad because I caused mom to cry, or I caused dad to be angry, or my parents left, whatever. We not only internalize I caused that, we also internalize a grandiose belief. If I can fix that, I can be better, I can be good to where that doesn't happen again. So basically what nice guys and nice girls do, like I said, I mainly work with men, but the paradigm applies to a lot of women as well. What they do is, first of all, they try to become what they think other people want them to be in order to be liked, loved, and get their needs met. And they try to hide anything about them, that toxic shame, that they think might get a negative reaction from people. So we become very guarded, non-transparent, hidden, often isolated, don't let people know what our needs are, what our wants are, what our feelings are, what our thoughts are, what our desires are, because people might have a negative reaction. And we then try to, kind of lick our finger, hold it up to the breeze and see which way, the wind's blowing. Okay, now I become a chameleon and try to become what I think that other person wants me to be. I'll be kind, I'll be caring, I'll be giving, I'll be generous, I'll be different than other men, I'll be different than dad, whatever it might be. So going back to a question you asked earlier, what's wrong with being a nice guy? The most fundamental thing wrong with being a nice guy is you're not honest, you're not authentic.
Yes.
There's not a you
from yourself.
Yeah. And you don't let the world see who you are. You don't let you see who you are. And so, in No More Mr. Nice Guy, that, like the first chapter to the book, I actually I list all the things that tend to be a problem for nice guys: our dishonesty, our giving to get, our strings attached, our not being dependable, our passive aggressiveness, our resentment. All of these things tend to make, quote, nice guys not so nice. But it all goes back to that core paradigm. I'm not okay just as I am. I have to hide that from people, and I have to become what I think they want me to be liked, loved, and get my needs met. Now, what all human beings do, and nice guys do, we take those early emotional dynamics, that emotional operating system that doesn't operate up in consciousness, but that primitive part of our brain is hardwired into every other part of our brain and hardwired into every sensory perception: sight, sound, taste, hearing, touch. And so that part of our brain drives the bus, the part of our brain that developed a picture of who I am, how the world is, and how I fit into the world. What we developed at a few weeks, few months, few years old tends to be the roadmap we carry into adulthood that now influences everything that we do. Friendship, work, education, sex, everything gets influenced by that really old, very primitive, very inadequate view of self in the world. And as I said, nice guy syndrome is just one way that shows up.
One possible manifestation, yeah. Because equally, you could have narcissism or anger difficulties or things like that.
Oppositionally defiant, everything's pushback, a lot of ways of doing it, or you just, disappear, I deal with a lot of people today that are just completely isolated from life. So there's many ways to try to manage this uncomfortable feelings from early in life. And none of them, they might have worked okay back then because all we had. They don't tend to work well when they're our primary operating system today.
Yes. In the book, I don't know if you've read the book Neurosis and Human Growth by Karen Horney, but she talks about how many people, because of trauma or for some other reason, have what she calls a basic anxiety, particularly in relation to other people, in relation to themselves, in relation to the world. They have this basic anxiety. And then neuroses follow one of a few patterns. to try and compensate and develop what she calls a neurotic self as distinct from the real self. You talked about kind of this idea that people can become disconnected from themselves. And she says one of these neurotic patterns is to tend towards others in a kind of compliant, submissive way, which to me sounds quite similar to the nice guy archetype.
It does. Yeah, it does. And when I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy, a primary premise of the book, kind of as I've just shared with you, was that a lot of this nice guy neurosis was based on internalized toxic shame. By the time I was done writing it, and by the time it got published, I was continuing to do my own work, working with lots of nice guys, leading like 5 nice guy groups a week for men. And I really came to the realization that nice guy syndrome probably is also equally built upon anxiety, kind of as Karen Horn I was saying. And so what I found is when men and women want to, come to understand themselves, their real self, and be their real self, we have to both we have to find safe places to release our toxic shame, the things we feel are bad about us, and get more accurate information that we're not broken, we're not evil, we're not sinful, we're not bad. And the second thing is learn to soothe anxiety states rather than trying to manage them. And I make a difference for managing anxiety is trying to control people and situations outside of us so we don't feel anxiety inside of us. Soothing anxiety is when we can breathe, calm ourselves, talk ourselves through, and move towards things that scare us rather than trying to manage them or control them.
Yes.
So anxiety is a big part of the nice guy syndrome.
I suppose if I had to take your work at the most superficial and really deliberately try and misconceive it.
Do it. That'd be fun.
I like doing that kind of thing as a thought experiment. I suppose I can hear I'm thinking of giving this podcast a really clickbaity title, like "Stop Being Nice." I'm sorry, everyone. I just had to draw you in with this clickbaity title. Yeah. But so the most superficial misconception could be that you're attacking the quality of kindness and compassion. But clearly, that's not what you're doing. What you're outlining is that a subset of people, both men and women, it sounds like, because of trauma, because of shame, because of anxiety, they try to adopt kindness and compliance as a primary strategy for showing value to the world and getting what they want. And that is the error, not that being kind is bad, but that really you should be kind. Real kindness comes from a place of strength rather than from a deficit.
Right. Well, that's well put. Yeah. In getting books published, if you want to actually sell books, number one, you have to write a good book, but it doesn't hurt to have a good title, to have I'll just call it a sexy vehicle to get people's attention and take them on a ride into what you want to share with them. And, the title, No More Mr. Nice Guy, was just such a natural title, just like I'm working with guys that claim to be nice guys. But there's a paradox in the title, of course, and you pointed that out, is that, we think, well, why would somebody write a book teaching men to be not nice? There's already enough not nice men out there. We don't need to train them more. But I think probably everybody at some point has said, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going to be different in this way. I'm going to set a boundary. I'm going to ask for what I want. I'm going to come out fighting. So everybody's probably said that. So there's that paradox. And I remember when I connected with my agent, who I've worked with for over 20 years now. He initially wanted me to change the name of the book. And he was a very successful, experienced New York agent. And I said, nope, non-negotiable. I'm not going to be a nice guy on that. I'm sticking with the title. Well, I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to his home in New York and to pick up a $75,000 check for, rereading the Audible version of it. And he says, that was just brilliant, having that title, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And I didn't tell him, Nat, you wanted me to change that. It has worked out well. And I remember when the book came out in hardcover, my publisher with Barnes & Noble, they'd gotten into the publishing business for a little while. They sent me on a book tour and started in New York City. And I remember I went into this Fifth Avenue Barnes & Noble store, and with the recent releases, there was like a whole shelf of just my book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And I was just kind of standing back, just looking at that going, what planet am I living on? Here I am, New York City, Fifth Avenue. Here's my book in a Barnes and Noble. And, it felt good. And I remember watching this guy come down a stairway and he looked like kind of a sensitive new age guy, had a ponytail and, looked kind of like maybe my ideal reader. And he stops and looks at the book. And he picks it up. And I'm watching him. He reads the cover. And I could kind of see from his body language, just kind of like, what is this? And then he turns it over and reads the back cover. And I thought, that's all I need to see. It worked. It got people's attention. So, of course, people that want to take things superficially and actually not read could take the name and say, well, Dr. Glover's teaching men to be assholes. And believe it or not, men have the hardest time kind of grasping this, that learning to do recovery from nice guy syndrome, to find your true self, your real self, is not about, guys will say, well, okay, I get that being a nice guy doesn't work, but I don't want to go to the other extreme of being an asshole jerk. And they go, well, I need to find a middle ground. And I usually say, I don't know where the tipping point is between two dysfunctional extremes. Both the asshole jerk and the wussy doormat are both trying to manage their anxiety states. And one does it they're both in fight, flight, freeze. What we might call the jerk, he's just being aggressive and abusive and dominant. Whereas the nice guy is being subtly manipulative and avoidant to deal with his anxiety. So I said, really breaking free from the nice guy syndrome, finding that true self, doesn't involve becoming more of a jerk. And it doesn't necessarily become, I got to become less nice. It really is about finding your true self, to where your niceness is genuine, where you're authentic, where you're giving because it's what people need to receive, not what you need to give to feel good about yourself or get value or approval. So I think when men and women do this kind of, quote, recovery work, they become more honest, they become more authentically nice and kind and caring. I believe they become more generous with no strings attached. And I think they can love and receive love much more effectively. So this isn't about becoming, what we might think of just going from one extreme to the other. It really is about creating what I'll call just a second order shift, where we don't just try to do more or less of something, where we go through this fundamental shift of coming back to who we really are, what's really important to us, what we really value, what excites us, what we're passionate about, what has meaning to us, what our truth is. That's a powerful shift.
Yeah, I think the phrase "no strings attached" really jumps out at me. I think it's so important when you are doing an act of kindness for anyone in your life to really interrogate yourself. Like, what are my motivations here? Yeah. Am I purely trying to improve someone's life on a small scale or a large scale? Or do I have some underlying motivation, because it is quite insidious. What you said about nice guys being afraid to turn into assholes, if I could use a gym analogy, I do gym analogies sometimes. Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
It's a bit like when people go to the gym and they're afraid to touch weights at all because they think they'll bulk up. And it's like, no, you're not going to bulk up unintentionally. It's very, very difficult actually to do that. But on the subject of more aggressive men, do you think that there are women who are attracted to men who are hyper aggressive and who turn out to be bad for them, and they have that kind of almost reverse nice guy pattern?
Oh yeah, I mean I think you don't have to look far to see that as a pretty common pattern. And my theory about that is that basically women have had two options when it comes to what kind of men they connect with, in terms, talking about heterosexual patterns. And the two options are the men that lean towards the asshole jerk and the men that lean towards the passive wussy doormat. Now, the asshole jerk might be the man we think of more as the patriarchal, the dominant, the aggressive type man. And that, I think, feels real familiar to the feminine psyche. And in some ways, there's payoffs to it. I mean, there's been enough studies in social biology, evolutionary psychology, where the women are going to be attracted to the fierce warrior, to the man that can provide and protect, that can give them healthy offspring and then take care of them and their offspring. It's kind of an old evolutionary model. So there is some reasoning of them being attracted to more of what we might call the fierce type man. And if your only option then is just that fierce guy that might not treat you so well versus this passive guy that's going to try his best to please you and make you happy, never make a decision, never lead everything up to you, that's boring for most women. It's kind of like there's nothing to, light a spark. And, men complain about you always end up in the friend zone. Well, I tell guys, women don't put you in the friend zone. You put yourself in the friend zone by acting so much like a friend and hoping that the woman will then convert from being friends to lovers. And that rarely happens because for most, again, I'll make generalizations, but most women are attracted to something a little bit fierce, to a little bit powerful, to a little bit strong. And why wouldn't they be? Even current studies of highly successful, high earning women shows that they still want a man that matches their level of success and their earning power. And so there's still something, even in women that don't need a man's strength or money or support. There's I've read articles about a lot of high earning, high successful women can't get into a relationship because they can't find many men that match where they're at. So the feminine tends to want something fierce and strong. The one way I'll put it is a strong woman wants a guy that has enough backbone to match her strength. But where do women find that? I mean, women tell me all the time when I tell them what I teach nice guys, they'll go, where can I find men who've, taken your classes? I've had women that come wait in your parking lot and meet the men that come out of your seminars. They say, you need to put up a website where these guys, that you've worked with who know how to be authentic, who know how to set the tone and lead, who know how to say what they want, who know how to set a boundary, who know how to, differentiate, and women tell me, if a woman has any degree of insight about self and relationship, they go, where can I find that guy? I want that guy. I don't want the guy that treats me bad, never available to me, cheats on me with my best friend. But I don't want the guy that lets me walk all over him and forces me to make all the decision because he doesn't want to upset me in any way. And so, again, I have empathy for women. They haven't had an abundance of healthy choices when it comes to healthy relationship.
Yeah. So really what women ideally would want is an integrated male who has learned to be familiar with his aggression and can use it and can show it when necessary. And by aggression, I mean in a really broad way, because aggression defined broadly psychologically can mean movement to get something that you want. So men that are familiar with their own aggression have integrated it, and then from that place of relative strength can then choose to be kind.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'll give you two examples. Like I said, my pattern as a nice guy was to avoid conflict, be pleasing, and women in my life early on, especially my second wife, who I was married to when I started doing this work. She said, I never feel safe with you. I never feel protected by you. And she would even say to me, how do I know you'll ever stand up for me if I don't even know you can stand up to me? She's saying, I want you to have enough strength. My current wife, we've been married about 6 years, strong Mexican woman, grew up in poverty, 8 out of 10 kids. She's strong, just strong in every way, physically, emotionally. And she says, I know I have bigger balls than you. And she said, I've been through more than you. She said, I don't want to ever think I have bigger balls than my husband. I don't want you to just like lay down. And she said, I love it when you tell me no. I love it when you make decisions, because she feels safe. But the two stories. One, like I said, my second wife used to say, I never feel safe. You never stand up to me, never stand up for me. And just kind of a funny little story. We were having a barbecue and had some friends over, and I lived near a golf course years ago. So after we got done eating, we went, maybe 3 or 4 couples to go just play some golf. We were just going to play best ball, just hit some balls. And my wife had never golfed before. So, we kind of get her set up to go first, and she's teeing her ball up and kind of taking a practice swing or two. And there's a steward on the golf course. I don't know what they call him, the chief, referee, whatever. And, they tell you when to go. You can hit now, to manage the traffic on the golf course. And she's like taking a practice swing. And he's an older guy. And he just started barking at her from about, 20, 30 feet away. Hey, I didn't say you could go yet. You just started. He was just barking at her. And without even thinking about it, I walked over to him. I got right in his face to face with him. I said, listen, this is her first time ever to play golf. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's nervous. She's anxious. And I said, listen, I want you to make this a good experience for her. And he just kind of calmed down. He said, kind of nodded, walked over, kind of coached her on her grip a little bit on her swing, kind of gave her a few instructions for hitting the ball, and, wished her well to have a good. And she, later on that night, she was crying. And she said, I've never felt so loved in all my life. And I thought, wow, but I took that power, that aggression, that fierceness, and used it in a way that made her feel safe. And then I tell more stories. I've had many situations like that where I just showed a subtle awareness of our surroundings, showed a little strength, kind of created a sense of safety for the woman I was with in public or various situations. And the women all look at me and go, that was amazing. Because most women have not had that experience of a man being conscious and aware enough to use fierceness in a way that creates a healthy boundary and makes them feel safe. Again, not being aggressive or being an asshole, but integrating all those aspects of ourselves that makes people feel loved and cared for.
Yeah. I think when I was listening to you on another podcast, you talked about the kind of uncomfortable fact that there is a continuum in behavior between, on one end, simply being the kind of person who can pursue what they want, what they desire, having boundaries, and on the other end of the continuum, being dysfunctionally aggressive, being hyper-dominant, making other people uncomfortable. That it's the same set of traits fundamentally, but taken to an extreme. So when people talk, for example, about toxic masculinity, and some people have talked about, although I do think they tend to be on the more radical end of things, but they talk about the idea of throwing out masculinity in general. What you would say to that is they're throwing a very important baby out with the bathwater, that by canceling masculinity as a whole, there are very important gems which we're also throwing out, like the ability to assert oneself in cases of injustice, the ability to deploy healthy boundaries, the ability to pursue what you desire in life. And of course, this applies to both men and women, because both men and women have and benefit from these kinds of traits.
Well, and I think, yes, it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's easy. For example, I hear people in some contexts talk about the patriarchy, and like everything about the patriarchy is identified as being evil, is men being controlling and abusive of less powerful. But there's also sides of patriarchy that was meant to provide and protect. That it isn't all about abuse and control, that there's value to it. Now, when we talk about masculine and feminine, it's too easy to just say, all right, men are masculine, women are feminine. It's obviously we all have, a yin and yang. We all have a masculine, feminine part to ourselves. I'm actually relatively feminine in many ways. I love connection. I love the flow of love. I love comfort. I love to feel good, which would be more what we'd consider a feminine trait. I've had to cultivate more masculine traits, more of the doer, the penetrator, the action taker in myself. I've had to actually work at that. But men and women all have both sides. And, I break it down pretty simply that the masculine does, feminine is done too. Now, unfortunately, the feminine part of ourselves has been done too in many painful, abusive ways. And this is especially true for a feminine creature, where being done to isn't always pleasurable. I mean, it can be amazingly pleasurable, but it can also be amazingly abusive. And so I think if you've been done to and felt victimized, you go, well, that's all bad over there. Anything, quote, masculine is bad. And I remember I read like an op-ed article by, I think, a pretty successful woman, after 9/11 in the United States. And she wrote this op-ed article that said, she'd kind of taken that kind of feminist approach. I don't need a man. When men try to help me, they're being, patriarchal, they're being condescending. I can always put my own suitcase up in the overhead bin by myself. I don't need a man to help. And she said, she kind of took pride in that. But then she said after 9/11, when she saw men standing up for the well-being of others, like the men that rushed the cockpit to bring down one of the airplanes, firefighters rushing into buildings. She said, wait a minute, I made a mistake. Yeah, there's great evil that the masculine can do, and there's great good that the masculine can do. And in this op-ed article, it's kind of an apology. She said, if a man offers to do something kind for me, I'm going to let him. And especially if it's just coming out of kindness and care, not because she's not capable or is being condescending. So I think conscious masculinity, conscious femininity are both really powerful, and we all have access to both. And at any given moment, they best meet a need. They're, I for a while now I've been saying, people that have like been through 12-step programs are familiar with what they call the serenity prayer. And it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, basically, the way I break that down is that's help me best use my masculine and feminine side. My higher feminine is I accept what I can't change. I surrender, and that's powerful. The higher masculine of me changes the things that I can. That's powerful. And the wisdom comes knowing how to blend the two, and the wisdom to know the difference. When do I need to be in my feminine and accept what I can't change and surrender and not become a victim to it? When do I need to be in my masculine, change what I can? And again, I'm not, people want to put value on, well, the masculine good, feminine bad, feminine good. And I had teachers in grad school that did a lot of that. Everything about masculinity bad, everything about femininity is good, while they were teaching the women to be more masculine. Go pursue degree, go pursue career, be more aggressive, take charge, while they were saying those traits in men were bad. So, it's been I think we're actually moving into a really good place where we can come to celebrate and embrace, masculine and feminine, and men and women. And it's not like one's good, one's bad, one's better, one's worse. And we recognize the quality and value if we're conscious of both.
Yes. Yeah, I find that anytime people have been traumatized, not had their needs met to a great degree, felt very isolated. I think the pandemic was a good example. Anytime these things happen, people are just so vulnerable to ideology. It makes me think of the German people being vulnerable to Nazism because of economic deprivation. Or another example on the subject of gender is there's a lot of corners on the internet devoted to men's psychology and men's health, but I can see it in a lot of this content like yours, which is balanced, but then there's content which is subtly degrading of women and subtly putting women in a kind of one down position as well. And it's those kinds of it's really vulnerability that seems to lead to people to having these overly simplistic models of the world, because they're soothing, they make people feel less anxious.
Yeah, they are soothing. And I don't spend a lot of time on the internet, and I don't spend time on social media, mainly just because, I guess life has enough bullshit in it without going looking for bullshit. Life is challenging enough without seeking simplistic answers and finding, these echo chambers where we, just read and listen to people who say exactly what we already think and feel. And social media is set up to be an echo chamber. You listen or look at one thing, social media platforms are going to give you more of that. And yeah, I'm deeply involved in a men's recovery movement, a men's empowerment movement. And, I've spoken at red pill conferences and pickup conferences. And I know a lot of times it's kind of, they have us against them, it's a battleground, women have done to men and we've got to, do to them before they can do to us. And, and I try to preach a little sanity, and I'm well received. So that's a good thing. Because I care about men, and I care about men being our best selves. And most men want a healthy relationship with a healthy partner. And so if we're caught up in this kind of victim mentality, us against them, they're doing this, they're causing that, that really rules out getting into a healthy, reciprocal, mutually gifting type of relationship.
Yes. So let's say your stereotypical nice guy walks into your clinic and describes the problems. He's not good at setting boundaries. He's disconnected from what he wants. he has a sense of shame, which he finds very hard to reveal to others. He's not getting what he wants from his relationship. What maybe you could outline roughly the steps that a person like that, what you'd guide him through in terms of recovery.
Yeah, and I'll basically guide you through what I did in terms of my own recovery, because it seems to be somehow intuitively I stumbled and bumbled my way through, landing in some good places to do some good work. I would say number one, and I say this in the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and I still repeat this to men all the time. And again, everything I'm going to say is often true for women wanting to recover their true self as well. But because I work with men, I tend to speak in that way. But number one, find safe people. I tell nice guys, you didn't become a nice guy in social isolation. You won't recover in social isolation. And most nice guys want to do it themselves, mainly because they don't want to feel vulnerable and they don't want to feel exposed, because that triggers their toxic shame. They're not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm bad, whatever they've internalized. So I say, find safe people. That can be a therapist. It can be a coach. It can be a minister, a rabbi, a men's group, a 12-step group. But find safe people where you can start practicing a couple of things. One, revealing yourself, revealing the things about you that make your knees knock, that make you shiver, that make your palms sweat, to reveal that, and notice, the world doesn't end. People don't come unraveled. They don't attack you. They act loving towards you. And then also let them give you feedback about your true self, that you're not a flawed human being. You're not bad because you have these internal beliefs about yourself. And a couple examples. One, I had a guy who was he came and did a weekend workshop with me, African-American guy. And so grew up in an American culture and he was a big guy, where, he kind of grew up with this, people are going to think I'm dangerous, I'm bad, kind of a stereotypical racial dynamic. So he really went the other extreme to just, be kind and passive and pleasing and not ever intimidate anybody. And we're talking about toxic shame. And he started crying in this workshop, and he revealed, how bad he felt about himself because of the terrible things he'd done. And the people in the workshop, it was a small group, about 7, 8 guys and myself. And we said, can you give an example of something you've done that's so terrible? Oh, he just started weeping. And he said, well, when I was in junior high, I broke into a car and stole a car radio. And everybody's looking at him going, and? and he kind of, when he was ready to hear it, kind of everybody in the group just shared, man, I don't think you're bad for that. That was just a dumb, adolescent thing to do. And everybody else started listing dumb adolescent things they did. And it's kind of like he lit up. And you would think that's just a small little thing. I saw that guy's life transform. I've been working with him previous to that one-on-one, kind of over the internet counseling. He was in a relationship. He let his partner treat him badly, tell him how he was this and all. You just beat him up. And after that moment, he broke up with her, started having healthier relationships. Just that one little thing of releasing shame and getting more accurate feedback just was transformative. And I had a similar powerful experience early in my recovery. Like I said, I was in a 12-step group. I'd gotten into therapy. I had an impulse, a sexual impulse, a dark impulse that I didn't act on, but it made me feel really bad. Now, prior to starting any kind of recovery, I probably would have pushed it down or not looked at it, and it would have, of course, everything manifests some way. Everything leaks out one way or another. But I had this dark impulse. And so I went to my 12-step group and I shared it with my 12-step group. These are guys, recovering sex addicts whose lives are out of control, right? And I shared my thing, and I didn't even act on it. I just had it. I think they're all thinking, Robert, why are you here? But I was like, Robert, thank you for sharing. I'm thinking, okay, nobody kind of went nuts over this thing. So I had an appointment with my therapist, a woman therapist, right after that. So I went to my therapist and I thought, okay, I'm going to tell her this thing. So I'm telling her this dark impulse that I had, and she looks at me with kindness and she just says, well, let's explore what that's about. I go, whoa, that's easy. And so I'm driving home, and and I used to tell my second wife that her middle name ought to be Overreact, because that's what she did in every situation. And she never actually overreacted when I told her that, because she knew it was true. And so I'm driving home thinking, all right, I'm a baseball fan. So I'm batting 1,000. I'm 2 for 2. I've told 2 people, 2 groups that about this thing, and nothing bad's happened. Even if my wife has a negative reaction, I'm still batting 750. I mean, not bad. Actually, 666, I guess. So not bad. 2 out of 3. And so I get home and I tell my then wife, I said, I got something to tell you. And I took her back to the bedroom and I said, I've already talked about this in my 12-step group. I talked about it with my therapist. And I said, here's the thing. I had this impulse. I didn't act on it, but it kind of scared me. And so I've talked about it in these places. And she just looked at me and she said, it doesn't surprise me. It kind of scares me, but I'm glad you told me. She never brought it up again. I thought, is it this easy? I mean, just learning to reveal self and practicing with safe people. This usually doesn't begin with your partner or your family, because we want them to approve of us, and they probably also have unconscious reasons to not want us to change in any fundamental way. But begin with safe people, coach, therapist, 12-step group, men's group, women's group, any kind of place where you can go practice being you, being the real you that has,
without judgments, without people who have vested interest in you.
And I mean, because the real us, has warts, it has flaws, and it has blemishes, but that doesn't make us bad. That doesn't make us unlovable. It just makes us human. And as I say in No More Mr. Nice Guy, people don't connect with perfect people. People connect with people's rough edges. When you see somebody struggling with what you've struggled with, you kind of like them and you want to connect with them. You want to know them better. So that is, for me, number one in Nice Guy Recovery. Find the safe people to begin revealing your shame and getting more accurate message about who you really are. That you're a good person. Yeah, you make mistakes, but you're okay. As a good friend of mine, a psychologist, told me one time after I'd acted in a way that I had a lot of shame about a few years back. And I just told him, I'm just having a hard time getting over this thing that I did. I hurt somebody that I care about. And he looked at me and said, Robert, he said, he holds out one hand. He goes, you can be an ass. And he holds out his other hand. He said, but you're not an ass. He says, when you can integrate those 2 truths, you'll learn what you need to learn from this and you'll be okay. I thought, how profound is that? I can be an ass. I can be hurtful. And I'm not an ass. I'm not a hurtful person, but I'm human. And when we can integrate that, there's such a release to just be ourselves and take risks and be vulnerable and let people get close to us. So to me, that is huge, is finding those safe people. The second thing that I tell people is start practicing honesty. Nice guys we've already talked about are pretty inauthentic. They only let people see what we think will be acceptable. We hide things. And so I had to start working at being honest. And where I tended to be the most dishonest, of course, was in a relationship. And so what I started doing, again, with my ex-wife, is that I told her, my intention is to be completely, totally honest and transparent with you. And I told her what I'm going to do. Whenever I notice myself, the little voice in my head constructing a deceit, a lie, a less than the truth, leaving this piece of information out, redirecting, misinforming, what I said, I'm going to tell you that I'm doing it. And then I'm going to tell you what the whole truth is. So like if she would call me and say, what time are you going to be home from work? And I thought, she wants me home now. I better tell her I'm going to be home at 5, when I knew I wasn't going to be leaving till after 5. And then, but I thought, because so then on the way home, it's late. I'm cooking up stories. Traffic is terrible. There's this accident. I only lived a 4-minute drive from my house, or I worked 4-minute drive from my house. And so I'm cooking these stories up. So what I do is I got home, I'd tell her, I need to tell you something. I was going to lie to you. When you called and asked me what time I was going to be home, I lied because I thought you wanted to be home right then. And then all the way home, I was making up this story, and this story to tell you of why I'm late. And I said, the truth is, I just knew I wasn't going to leave the office at that time, but I told you that because I didn't want you to be mad at me. And she goes, I just want to know when you're going to be home so I know when to have dinner ready. and it was that simple. So working at being honest, because it is so terrifying for nice guys to just be what you see is what you get kind of person. So,
and honesty is a practice,
It is. I'm still practicing it. I still, whenever I catch myself saying, don't tell it that way or leave that out, I go, no, tell it that way. Don't leave that out.
I think most people, when it comes to honesty, they think in the paradigm of, if it's something serious, I'll be honest. But when it comes to a white lie, like say what time I'll be home from work, I'll allow myself to do that. But at least in my own experience, I find you have to be very deliberately practicing being honest in those small white lie situations. Because if you're not honest in those small situations, good luck being honest when actually a big thing comes through, which might carry where you actually done something wrong or I need to be honest about. So I really do feel it's a practice.
It is. You know, I remember my stepdaughter from my second marriage, when she was like 14 or 15, like most adolescents, she didn't always tell the whole truth, which that's natural in children because they're less powerful than everybody else. The bigger people have power. So children lie to level the playing field or to try to level it anyway. And so she told me, I remember one time I said, you know, Jamie, I can't believe what you tell me if you don't tell me the truth all the time. And she goes, well, I probably tell you the truth 80% of the time. And I go, well, that sounds good, but I don't know when I'm getting the 20% or the 80%, because I do know you lie 20% of the time. So I don't know which is which. And it is so hard for people to get close to other people if they don't know what's true. And for example, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed 3 or 4 new consulting coaching clients. And every one of them were guys that were moderately successful, whose marriages were crumbling. And they kept saying the 2 things stood out. My nice guy tendencies get in the way of me living up to the success that I know I should. And my wife tells me she can't trust me. And they go, I try to do everything for her, be nice and do it, but she says she can't trust me. And I go, she can't. Because like you said, if you lie about the little, tiny little things, you know, partners, and especially female partners, are going to go, well, if he lies about little stuff, what else is he lying about? What else don't I know? And out of being a security-seeking creature, they're going to imagine worst case scenario. And so it is so essential to have intimacy. You have to have honesty. And intimacy is, my definition is knowing self and being known by another. So if we don't know ourselves, and if we don't let people know us, we can't be intimate. You know, well, we kind of try to dance around relationship, but there won't be a true intimacy and trust. And those are essential.
Yes, and a lot of your work seems to revolve around the idea of truth and honesty, and not just in a verbal sense, like what you say, but actually what you do, because actually some of the most reliable ways of knowing what you actually think or feel about something is how that corresponds to your behavior. And so, you know, the phrase living your truth is kind of corny and it's attached to a lot of woo stuff. But what you're saying is that what men have to do in part is to start to learn to discover themselves so that they can actually manifest that in the world through the job that they do or how they conduct themselves in very practical, real world scenarios.
Yeah. And again, that does take practice, as you've indicated. And to add to another piece of nice guy recovery, most men I work with tend to be disconnected from other men. And often nice guys will say, well, I'm just more comfortable with women. I can relate to them more. But what happens is most men are also kind of in this mindset of, you know, kind of the golden rule of modern culture is don't piss off the woman. You know, don't do anything at work, relationship, on the internet that might piss off a woman. And so that makes us dishonest. And I tell guys, not only do we need to connect with men to embrace more of our masculine self that most nice guys have pushed aside, because we're trying to be different from father, different from bad men, different from the asshole jerks we've heard women complain about. So we get connecting with men in men's groups, men's programs, just doing guy things with guys gets us more connected with our own masculinity. But in those places, I found we can practice being more honest. Because for most men in relationship, we practice what I call maintaining the possibility of availability. We're trying to keep our partner in a good enough mood that they'll want to have sex later on. And we think if they're upset about anything, they won't want to have sex. So I better, whatever I do, I better not upset them. But with our guy friends, usually we don't have that same agenda. And we can just be honest and transparent. And I tell guys, being honest with men is a great place to practice coming home and being honest in your more intimate relationships, whether you're a single guy dating or, a guy in relationship. As long as we're afraid of upsetting our partner or a female or prospective partner in any way, we're not going to be honest with them. And the funny thing is, they sense it, they read it, they know it. I've had women accuse me of lying, and I'm sitting there going, well, what they're accusing me of, they're wrong. I am lying. But how do they know that? But they do. The people sense mistruth, and they read it in our body, our tone of voice. So telling the truth, again, is just what creates a foundation to let people get close to each other and have trust and be vulnerable and experience what most of us truly want to experience in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And there's also something to be said for having the courage to be disliked, at the extreme end, to let go of this need for external validation. There's actually a book called The Courage to be Disliked, which is written about the psychology of Alfred Adler.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I see it, not everyone is supposed to get along, and that nature gave us very different personality types, in my view, to solve the issue that life throws a series of unpredictable problems of an infinitely changing and dynamic nature. So similarly, you need a mix of personalities that is infinitely changing, which is why we have such complex personality structures, and we have all these different types of people who like conflict, people who hate conflict, extroverts, introverts, people who work hard, people who know how to relax, and everything in between. And that group of people just aren't always gonna get along, and that can be okay as well. They can have safe, civilized disagreements, ideally.
Yeah, as long as they're not on the internet. And when I got divorced in my late 40s and had to learn how to date and meet women and get into a relationship, one of the things I quickly found is that, most people when they date, especially nice guys, they work really hard at trying to get the other person to approve of them and like them. And especially if the guy is attracted to the woman, they want that woman to be attracted to them. So they do everything to try to make that happen. And the thing is, I tell guys, the role of dating is not to get laid. It's not to get a girlfriend. It's not to have a partner. The role of dating is to find out what is a person's nature. And one of the primary principles I discovered and started teaching men was to be willing to get to rejection quickly. Meaning what you just said, find out this person isn't a good match for me. They love conflict. I don't. They're an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I may be drawn to that, but long-term relationship, introverts tend to be driven crazy by extroverts, and extroverts tend to be driven crazy by introverts. So be willing to get to rejection. Not everybody's a good match. Not everybody's going to be your best friend or be your future partner. And even in relationship, the men I work with started applying that to their relationships. When they were walking on eggshell with their partner, not wanting to upset her in any way, they'd say, listen, I need to find out, can this woman be with me just the way I am, without me walking on eggshells? And so whatever they had been avoiding doing, saying, bringing up, whatever, the guys would just start, I'll get to rejection quickly. I'll be me. I'll speak my truth. I'll do what feels right to me. I'll pursue the actions that feel right. And if she can't deal with that, I need to find that out and get to rejection quickly. And then ideally, at some point, find a better partner that matches us better. So I agree that we're not meant to get along with everybody. That's okay. I think having, 3 or 4 good friends, maybe 20 or 25 associates that we like dropping in, and, a really close, intimate relationship or two, probably about all we can handle. We don't need everybody to like us. We don't need everybody to want to hang out with us.
Yeah, I've had a number of therapy clients where the main thing we've worked on in the end is dating and relationships. And the pattern for both men and women does seem to be what I've heard you describe and others describe, which is when people go on dates, they're just so preoccupied with, does the other person like me, as opposed to, do I like the other person? And what I try and...
Good question.
Good question. And the frame I encourage when it comes to dating is to treat every date as an experiment, because no matter what happens really on a date, it's an opportunity to learn about yourself and about the person that you're on the date with, and about perhaps male nature and female nature, whatever applies really. But you can always get really useful information and wisdom from a dating experience, which you can then continue to apply and continue to grow.
I agree with you 100%. My second book, Dating Essentials for Men, really was about using conscious dating to both expand our social and emotional intelligence and to create healthier relationships. I mean, I'm a relationship guy by nature and training. My training is around relationship. And, I tell guys, this applies to, the rules apply to both men and women, and to all orientations. The relationship you end up in is going to be the result of how you dated. And if we dated trying to please somebody, get their approval, avoid conflict, get them to like us, trying to maintain and manage that in a long-term relationship is really difficult. I know. I've tried that. But if you just show up and be you and be curious and get to know the other person, and I tell the guys I work with, I think it takes maybe 3 years of conscious dating to truly know another person. And I've had a number of experiences that right about the 3-year mark, the woman either acted in a certain way or revealed something about herself. I thought, well, I didn't see that coming. How have I known this person for 3 years and didn't know this pretty fundamental thing about them? But if we're in this trying to get them to like us, trying to keep them happy and keep them wanting to keep being our boyfriend or girlfriend, we never do find out, are they a good match for me? Does their nature match what I'm looking for? And so, yeah, it is good to just have more of a curiosity of who are they and what is their nature, and how do I feel hanging out with them based on their nature? Are they kind? Are they generous? Or are they caring? Can they communicate well? Or are they angry? Are they negative? Are they critical? Or are they aggressive towards other people? Find those things out early on. Get the rejection.
And on the subject of dating, something that I don't think is really discussed enough is the fact that the dating landscape has changed dramatically in the past 5 to 10 years because of dating apps. They've really, at least where I live in London, but in most places in the West, at least as far as I can see, dating apps have become the default way of meeting someone. Have you noticed any impact as a result of this in your clients? I imagine it might do something to promote on some level the nice guy syndrome, because it takes away the men's need to be the protagonist to approach the woman in a real life situation, wherever that happens to be. So I can see how maybe it would subtly reinforce that paradigm. But have you noticed anything?
Yeah, well, here's what I've seen is that a couple of surveys that I ran into in the last 2 to 3 years. And I probably won't quote these exactly correctly, but they were something along the lines that for the first time since, sociologists, people started tracking these kind of statistics. For the first time in history, over half of, I think, I don't know if it's just men or men and women both, but let's just say men, over half of men 35 or younger report themselves as being single. The first time in history that's ever happened. Prior to that, much smaller percentages of men indicated they were single. High percentages indicated they were in a relationship. Another survey that I saw in the last 2 or 3 years is that something like another figure of this is that like half of all single men report not having had sex in the last year. So as you said, we have the swipe right, swipe left culture with all the apps. We have dating boot camps. We have pickup. We have hookup. We have everything that you think. We have easy divorce. People can get in and out of relationships easily. You would think that people would be finding better matches and be in better relationships because of technology and just change of cultural norms. But I think what is created is what I just call hookup culture, is that both men and women are out there just looking for quick fixes. I think, a lot of men and women think, well, I don't want to get locked down in a relationship. That will rule out me meeting somebody else that might be better. It might mean I got to get off the app and let go of all that constant attention I keep getting. Men and women both, like that attention. It's addictive. And so what's happened is we've created this hookup culture where theoretically it's easier to meet somebody right around the corner from you. If you're swiping right, they're swiping right. And more men and women are single and available and expressing the desire to connect. Fewer and fewer people are actually connecting in any kind of meaningful long-term way. And so whether that's creating more nice guys or not, I'm not sure. Most approaches to dating that target men usually promise them kind of a pie in the sky magic bullet. Do these 10 things and you'll have every hot woman taking their clothes off for you without you having to ever risk embarrassment or rejection. And men fall prey to that stuff all the time. Because we want that easy path, to have, beautiful women want to get naked with us. It doesn't exist. I think that the most authentic way to make it happen is be you, be authentic, be real. And that seems to be pretty attractive to the opposite sex. So yeah, what I've seen, like I said, is just a hookup culture where fewer and fewer people actually report being in a relationship, and fewer people are actually having sex on any kind of regular basis.
So I don't even think it is even a hookup culture, because like you said, the statistics show that less and less people are having sex. And I think what dating apps have not taken into account as a technology, which maybe they could take into account in the future, is dynamics between the genders and the way men select women. The way men select women being quite different from the way women select men. And they also haven't taken into account the fact that the way you present yourself on a dating app is a subtle commodification of a potential partner, where you take away the X factor that you can sense from someone in real life.
Yeah.
And people become a series of characteristics that we now take hyper seriously, like 6 feet, a man has to be 6 foot, this good looking, etc., or a woman has to be
earn this much money. Yeah. And I agree. And I think the dating apps probably do. I mean, they have a lot of good scientists on board. They probably do take those things into account, but really they're just wanting to keep people using the dating app. I mean, that's their main goal. Here's the deal. You know this. Most people fall in love with a caricature of a real person, mainly because when people fall in love, both people are usually presenting a caricature of themselves. Look at what a great person I am. Look at what a great catch I am. I don't swear. I don't fart. I clean my fingernails, or, whatever. We're trying, to present our best self because we want people to like us. So you got two people presenting their best selves. The woman is dressing up, doing her nails, doing her hair, wearing the sexiest outfit. The guy's taking her to the nicest restaurant, whatever the rituals are, right? Neither one's really being themselves. Neither one's really saying what they really think, what they really feel, what they, really want. And because, oh no, I don't want to upset the other because I want them to like me. So not only do the two people fall in love with somebody, they're not really even seeing the whole person. Most beginning stages of love, or I don't know all the psychological terms for it, but we're falling in love with an object. We're recreating something with mom or dad.
I suppose idealization would be the term. You idealize someone.
Yeah, we idealize somebody, so we want them to be this amazing person to make up for the love we didn't get from mom and dad or haven't gotten in other relationships, and so these apps, and when I was dating, the dating apps hadn't come along yet, but I used like Match.com and other online apps. And you're right, people make decisions based on, is he tall enough? For guys, 10 to 15% of the women on these dating apps get 80% of the attention from the men, and purely for physical reasons. I remember seeing on Match.com, a woman would put a picture up there of her and a girlfriend, and you see the two, women do that a lot on their apps. They put them and a girlfriend or two girlfriends, I'd always go, I hope she's the good looking one of the two or the three. That's how we men are. And guys will tell me, well, I want to date women like younger than me, but on the mat. So should I lie about my age? Should I, if I'm 53, should I really say I'm 43? So, women will, I'll fit in their categories of the younger women. And I'll go, no, don't lie. Don't lie. And I said, that's one of the real drawbacks of dating apps is that not only are we already falling in love with a projection, a caricature, an idea of a person, people are presenting those things and we're narrowing the traits down further and further. So for example, when I was dating, I didn't pursue younger women, but traditionally younger women came on to me. And I was just being me. I'm not a pickup guy. I just go out. I worked at becoming more social and more interactive and more confident and bolder. And that seems to be arousing to a lot of women. And I noticed the women that were drawn to me, if I put my age on a dating app, they probably wouldn't have ever communicated with me. But in person, that X factor you mentioned, and that they just felt something, as a dating guru, David D'Angelo or Evan Pagan used to say, attraction is not a choice. And in many ways, it's not. It is just something we experience or we don't experience with another person. And an app really can't convey that beyond just a few physical, superficial characteristics of another human being. And, I tell guys, oh, I want to date younger women. I want to date hot women. And I'll mess with them. I'll say, okay, your car needs work on. What do? You can go look for, the car mechanic that's the best ass to work on your car, or you need heart surgery. You're going to go find the best looking heart surgeon you can find. And they think I'm being stupid, and I am. And I go, no, you're going to go find the best mechanic. You're going to find the best heart surgeon, because those are important things. And I said, but when you go looking for a potential long-term partner, you're going to base it on a few superficial body parts. And that's what you're going to base, the person you pick to get into a relationship with. But again, we're wired to be drawn to certain things and in the opposite sex. And, but the apps just hone in on those few little things that evolution and biology is wired into us to be turn-ons.
Yeah, and I also think people's social skills are degrading as a result, and it's a problem because we've talked a lot about just how bad isolation is for you, and I now worry that a lot of people think sitting at home on the app is the equivalent of getting dating experience. Like they almost think like that's now my version of like going on a date is sitting at home on the couch swiping through people. But back to your point, so you feel that by revealing yourself, by being who you are as early as possible in the dating experience, you can maybe short circuit the worst excesses of that idealization. Because I kind of think the idealization of falling in love isn't an entirely bad thing. I think there's a reason it exists.
No, I don't either. If it didn't exist, why would we even talk?
But as you say, it can be taken to an extreme where you really don't know the person you're dating. They really are a caricature of themselves. So it is important, as you say, to as early as possible reveal yourself. I'm training as a psychotherapist now, and what I've noticed is a huge amount of the psychotherapy training, which is my personal therapy, peer groups, and supervision groups, is about practicing revealing yourself in a sincere way and showing your inner world. It's a very soft skill, but it's an incredibly useful skill because it just makes you it makes you comfortable with yourself to a degree you couldn't really envisage before.
I'm glad that that's the kind of training that is happening in therapy schools now. I'm not sure it was always that way. It wasn't that way when I was in grad school. It was more about just skill sets, hard skills, not the soft skills. And that's good to see. And my Dating Essentials for Men book, really, like I said, it's about teaching men to have a greater social and emotional intelligence and using their desire to have a girlfriend or have sex as the motivation to work on themselves, to challenge themselves. Now, unfortunately, my approach is always get out of the house and just begin communicating and become more of a social animal. COVID kind of put a dent in that. And, it's just a reality we've had to deal with. And as you're saying, it probably is very likely that, yeah, I work with a lot of men that, again, don't have a lot of social skills anyway and tend to isolate. And COVID probably just put a bigger dent in that. And I'm just a big fan of just getting out and practicing being social, those soft skills. And I tell the guys I work with, miracles happen around people. So unless you got a living room full of people, you're not going to have many miracles in life. And another one of my mantras is I love waking up in the morning, not knowing how my day's going to end. And usually that means I got to get out of the house. If I'm going to have, some surprise in my day that I didn't see coming. If I just stay home and do my routines that I do every other day, not going to have too many adventures or too many miracles, or probably not going to meet too many new interesting people.
That line really stood out for me in your book. That line, I don't know how my day is going to end.
Yeah. And
very interesting.
I remember I had a guy in one of my groups, a single group for nice guys years ago when I was still in private practice. And he said, Robert, when you say that you love waking up in the morning, not knowing how your day's going to end, he goes, for me, that would be pure hell. And I thought, and I love this guy because he was really socially isolated, probably on the spectrum. But he was so honest about it that he said, no, for me, that's hell. I want to know when I get up exactly what my day is going to look like. I want full control over it. And, if you invite people into your life, it usually brings in a few things that throw a few kinks into your best laid plans for how you think your day should go. But I think that's a good thing. I think that's a positive.
Yeah. I mean, I had this similar experience to what you described, except it was in retrospect. And it was after reading your book, and I had experiences where I had days that followed an unpredictable course, and I would, at the end of the day, being lying in bed, reflecting back on the day, almost in a kind of wonder of never having expected that a day could go the way it went.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good feeling, isn't it? It's kind of
a good feeling.
It's go, wow, life is interesting. But for many of us, life is scary, and we want to manage it and control it. And I do too. I love my routines, but I also just love just getting out and being around people, going to places I've never been, being around people I've never been around, being open, being engaging, and just interesting things happen.
Definitely. Do you have time for one more question, Dr. Glover?
Sure, let's do it.
So my last question is, because you've had a multi-decade career at this point, and when people have had long careers, I'm always curious, what's the one or a few things that have really shifted for them? What values have shifted, or what thing did they think, wow, I really got this wrong early in my career, and now I realize things are a bit more like this? What's shifted for you across the decades?
That's a good question. I like that one. I don't have a quick, easy answer for that one. Just what comes to mind is leaning into and facing fears, things that scare me or make me feel vulnerable. Starting a private practice was scary. Going through divorce was scary. Deciding I wanted to live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and going from a local private practice to doing everything online was scary. Moving to a foreign country was scary. Learning to date was scary. And so how both my life and career have gone and seem to have produced the most significant results is by going in the direction of what scares me. And I've been kind of teaching that to people for a little while now, is that fear is your North Star, is your true north. It shows you the direction that probably you need to go. And I had a really amazing experience last November. I was invited to be a guest speaker at an ayahuasca retreat center down in Costa Rica. And I'd never done ayahuasca. And my wife and I went, and it was just amazingly powerful for both of us. It really opened our relationship in many interesting ways. But it was scary to go do it. But their mantra was that they would teach you in classes before doing the plant medicine ceremonies. They would say, breathe, open, go towards what scares you. And that's just such a great mantra for life. I've been using that for everything in life. I just breathe, open, go towards what scares me.
Yeah, I think very useful. One of the few real truisms of psychotherapy, which is, if you go towards what scares you, you often get in a manageable way, you get a positive result.
That's been my experience. Like when I decided I was going to move from Seattle, Washington to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, I was scared. I mean, I put it off for years. And then the recession hit back in 07, 08, 09. My father died unexpectedly. My brother died unexpectedly. I thought, I got to go. And it's funny. Once I let go of the lease on my apartment, lease on my office, just kind of burned a bunch of boats and just went. It was amazing how many doors just opened up that made the whole process much easier than I ever could have planned or expected. So there's something about just pointing yourself in a direction, saying it scares me, but I'm going that direction, that things open up that you could not have planned, calculated, or figured out ahead of time.
Yeah, I have to say I've learned the exact same thing over and over again in different areas of my life. Well, Dr. Glover, it's been fascinating. I suspect I could talk to you for a long time. We've agreed far too much.
Far too much. Next time, let's have some more conflict, okay?
Yes, we've been too nice to each other. We've been nice guys. So next time, we'll find some things to really disagree about.
Let's do that. That'd be fun.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invitation, Alex. I've had a good time.
You are listening to the Thinking Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend or give us a rating. It really does help people to find us. If you find the podcast valuable, why not buy us a coffee to help keep us going? There's a link in the show notes. As ever, we love to hear from you and love to hear what you think. So drop us an email or get in touch on social media. Thank you so much.